Our government has been plagued by debt for the last 100 years and is becoming more and more problematic. Our government misplaces and throws away trillions of taxpayer dollars and has been doing so for decades. It's so bad that they put a limit on it. Unfortunately, this limit is as flimsy as the rule set of a kindergarten playground game, and now it affects all Americans. Hi, my name is Owen Muller, and today I'll be talking to you about the debt ceiling, what problems it causes, and how we can fix it. The debt ceiling has been an issue ever since its creation. It had good intentions but terrible consequences. Used by politicians to be blissfully ignorant to their abhorrent spending practices. And now it is a problem once again today, and there's lots we can do. For the better part of a year, I've kept a close eye on American economics, and because of this, I've amassed some knowledge about things like the debt ceiling and what it affects directly and indirectly. This being said, all the information presented to you today is also backed up by either government data or reports made by government employees. Today, I'd like to talk to you about what we can and should do to prevent an America with a never-ending debt to pay, and how to show our government that we are tired of picking up their slack. So I'd like to start by explaining exactly what the debt ceiling is and going through and what's going on around it currently. The U.S. Department of Treasury defines the debt ceiling as the total amount of money that the U.S. government is authorized to borrow to meet its existing legal obligations, including Social Security, Medicare benefits, military salaries, interest in the national debt, tax refunds, and other payments. Simply put, it's the debt that the government allows itself to carry. Made in 1917 for World War I, it was made so that we could borrow other countries' money to manufacture things such as weapons, tanks, and other machines of mass destruction. Now, sits at $31.48 trillion. And yes, that means that our country is currently almost in $31.48 trillion in debt. So what's happening with it right now? Everyone on both sides of the aisle wants to raise it. Unfortunately, just as things always are with politics in this country, they can't agree on how to raise it. Republicans want to cut funding to Medicaid or food stamp distributions. Democrats want to cut military spending or put caps on certain government-funded organizations. And there's a million other things that they're fighting about. It has made it impossible for them to come to an agreement until 2 days before imminent default. President Biden and Speaker McCarthy wrote a bill into the House which eventually passed into law just hours before a default. The House of Representatives have opened the writing of the bill to the public records, and on that bill it states that until January 1st, 2025, there will be a cap on non-defense spending, meaning their budget will remain stagnant. There will be no change in veteran care funds. $28 billion of COVID relief funds will be revoked. It will expand the work requirements necessary to qualify for food stamps. $1.4 billion will be revoked from the IRS budget. There will be no change in climate and clean energy funding, and most importantly, the debt ceiling will not be raised. Instead, they have promised that they will bring the debt ceiling down, our country's debt down to a manageable level with cuts proposed, along with many other things inside this bill. In essence, they're saying that they're pushing off the problem until January 1st, 2025. This is not a solution. In fact, it's even worse than raising the debt ceiling, which has been done in the past, and what seems to be what everyone wants. However, there's a better way. Raising the debt ceiling will cause a huge issue, and will not and I am sure that by 2025 they will not have fixed this issue. So we'll be in the exact same position as we are right now. Either raise the ceiling or default. If we raise it, it tells the government that they can keep spending whatever amount of money to whoever they want with absolutely no consequences. We are forced to keep paying for their mistakes as citizens, and they will increase the cost of living, housing, medical care, and other things that we need to live. If we raise it, it only pushes the problem on till later, which is exactly what they have just done a couple weeks ago. Our leaders do not learn from their mistakes if we keep bailing them out with our taxpayer money. And the government shows no interest in changing how they spend their money and have increasingly been spending on things not aligned with the public interest. These two charts to my right have been gathered from the U.S. Department of Treasury. The one on the far left is from 2021, and the one closest to me is from 2022. This year alone, even though that we've gone through only 6 months of it, our government has spent over $4.15 trillion, and according to the National Treasury's fiscal data, 10% of that has gone towards education, while 12% has gone straight into the military's pockets. What's more disturbing about this 12% is that only 1% of the $4.15 trillion has gone to the Department of Home Defense, the department that is in charge of keeping us safe on home soil. Our overseas protection receives 12 times the amount of funding given to those of our protectors in our neighborhoods. That is outrageous and ridiculous. We need to change this, and we can. The solution to this would be, instead of raising the debt ceiling as we have done 78 times in the past, we need to advocate for a default. A default is to admit failure to pay off your debt. The US has never defaulted, and so has good credit and reputation with other countries around the world. But the only reason we have not defaulted is because we keep raising our debt ceiling, pushing back deadlines that we were given to pay off our debts. Also, the government has done many times in the past, has loaned money out from other countries to pay off the countries that we are in debt to, which makes a vicious cycle of loaning and paying debts. Like I said before, we have raised the ceiling 78 times and nothing has changed. It is time for a new approach. A default will force our government to take responsibility for their reckless spending habits. It will force them to cut out irresponsible funding by an incredible margin and reallocate that money to paying off our debts. According to the White House itself, a default would also cause the government interest rates to go up. These interest rates do not affect citizens. It will not affect your banks or your car payments or anything like that. It is purely on the government, and in the future, if they fail to pay their debts to other countries in the agreed upon time, then their debt would jump in price, and it would continue to jump in price until it is paid in full. For any of those watching with experience with debt, especially debt with high interest rate, I'm sure you can agree that interest rates are a great motivator to pay your debts on time. A default would force our government to finally take responsibility for how they have been spending taxpayer money, rethink spending habits, and prevent them from getting into the situation again at the very least. We don't get to vote on such matters, but we do elect the people who do, so I ask that you always vote in your local elections and make your voice heard. I ask that you also protest for change in this country, for accountability, and for respect. Make your voices heard in your community and around the country. As I come to a close, I want you all to remember these few things. Raising the debt ceiling will solve nothing. It will only delay our issue. The government does not care for our public interest and consistently puts its own agenda first. And if we do not make the change soon, then it will only get worse. Finally, I want to be completely honest and say that because this is such a unique event, and if we are to default, then there's no way of predicting how long the default would last. And there are consequences to a default. There is a possibility that America could go into a recession. It depends on how long the government takes to reallocate enough money to pay off the debts, how long they drag their feet, and how long decisions are made. But I want to ask you this. Would you rather keep things the way they are now, with an ever-increasing debt ceiling, with the prices of homes, insurance, medical care, and other government-paid services slowly increasing until the cost of living eventually becomes impossible for the average American to survive on an honest living? Or would you take a risk and make the government face the consequences of their reckless and irresponsible actions? Make them pay their debts the same as they force us to under threat of homelessness or bankruptcy? Would you take a risk in order to ensure the price of living becomes something you can actually afford without working well into your 90s? Would you take a risk to guarantee our government realizes their mistakes and does not make them again? Would you?